From the unreal to the real. From darkness to light.
A handful of pages that hold an entire path.
I'm Theo.
And I'm Lena.
This is At the Feet of the Master.
We're glad you're here for the walk. Welcome back. And this is a slightly emotional one to be sitting down for, because it's the last of these.
I know, right? It is. The final episode. We've walked through this whole small book together, and today we reach the end of it.
So, for anyone arriving right at the finish, this has been a slow walk through At the Feet of the Master, taking it one quality at a time. We've done discrimination, learning to see clearly, desirelessness, loosening the grip of wanting, and good conduct, steadying yourself inside and then meeting the world.
And today, the fourth and final quality, love, which the book saves for last on purpose, because it considers it the most important of all of them. There's a line right at the start of this section that makes the claim plainly. He says that if love is strong enough in a person, it forces him to acquire all the rest, and that all the rest without it would never be enough.
Which is, like, such a striking way to order things, because you'd think love would be the soft one, the nice feeling you add at the end. And he's saying pretty much the opposite. It's like the engine. It's the thing that pulls the other three into place.
And that word pulls matters, because the first thing he does is take love away from where we usually put it. He says very directly that this isn't really about sentiment or feeling at all. His words are that it's not so much desire as will, resolve, determination.
Which surprised me, honestly, because we use that word love for the warm feeling, the rush, the affection, and he's almost setting that aside. He's talking about love as something closer to a settled decision, a direction you've turned your whole life in.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. That's how I read it too. Less the weather of a feeling, which comes and goes, and more a fixed resolve that stays when the feeling fades. And he says this resolve has to fill your whole nature so completely that there's no room left for anything else. It's not a part of you that loves, it's all of you, pointed one way.
And then he does the thing he keeps doing throughout this book, which I've come to really trust. He refuses to leave it floating up in the abstract. He immediately asks, so what does this actually look like on an ordinary day? And he gives two answers.
He does. He says, in daily life, love comes down to two things. First, that you be careful to do no hurt to any living thing. And second, that you always be watching for a chance to help.
Do no harm and watch for the chance to help. And I notice those are active, both of them. Even the first one. It's not just don't be cruel. It's be careful. Pay attention to where you might be doing harm without noticing.
And he takes the first one, doing no hurt, and gets, very specific about where the harm actually comes from. He names three things. He calls them the three sins against love: gossip, cruelty, and superstition. And he says these three do more harm in the world than anything else.
And the first one on that list just stopped me, because it feels so small next to the other two. Gossip. Right there beside cruelty. How does idle gossip end up in the same category as cruelty?
And his answer is genuinely interesting, because he traces it back further than the talking. He says gossip begins with a thought, with thinking about the evil in another person. And his view is that the moment you dwell on the bad in someone, several things happen at once. None of them good.
Walk me through them, because this is where it got under my skin a little.
So first, he says, you're putting more bad feeling into the world, just adding to the general weight of it. Second, if the fault really is there in the person, dwelling on it actually feeds it, makes it stronger. And here's the sharp part. He says, but usually the fault isn't even there. You've imagined it. And by thinking it of someone, you can tempt them toward becoming the very thing you imagined.
That one is unsettling, because it suggests our private thoughts about people aren't as private or as harmless as we tell ourselves. And then the third.
The third is that you do it to yourself. You fill your own mind with the bad, and in doing so, you make yourself, in his words, an ugly thing instead of a lovable one. So the gossip damages three people at once: the person talked about, the listeners, and the gossip themselves.
And then there's the contagion, which I think is the really modern feeling part. He describes how the person who gossips isn't content to think it alone. They want company in it. They go and tell others, hoping they'll believe it. And then everyone is pouring the same bad thought onto the one person. And he says this goes on, day after day, not by one person, but by thousands.
Which is almost eerie to read in a book this old, because he could be describing a pile-on online, word for word. The whole machinery of it, one bad thought, shared, amplified, joined by thousands, aimed at one person.
And his instruction is so simple, it's almost startling. Never speak ill of anyone. And when someone else starts to, gently say something like, perhaps this isn't true, and even if it is, it's kinder not to speak of it. That's it. That's the whole practice.
And I find that line weirdly beautiful, because it's not even a confrontation. It's not, how dare you? It's just a soft door closing. Perhaps it isn't true, and even if it is, it's kinder not to. You can almost feel the temperature of a room drop when someone says that.
Okay, so that's gossip. Then he moves to the second sin, cruelty.
He splits cruelty into two kinds, intentional and unintentional. Intentional cruelty, deliberately causing pain to another living thing, he calls the very worst of all the sins. And his examples are of their time. He points at the inquisitors, at people who were cruel in the name of religion, at cruelty done to animals, including hunting purely for sport.
And there's a line in there I want to call out, because it lands just as hard now as it must have then. He says people excuse their cruelty by saying it is the custom. Everyone does it. And then he says, a crime does not stop being a crime just because many people commit it.
The idea that something widely done, normal, accepted, can still be wrong. That the sheer number of people doing a thing tells you nothing about whether it's right. That's as sharp now as it was then.
And then he turns to the kind of cruelty I think is actually more relevant to most of our lives, which is the unintentional kind, the cruelty of thoughtlessness.
And this is where it gets quietly convicting, because most of us would never do the dramatic, intentional thing. But he says so much suffering is caused just by carelessness, by not thinking how an action lands on someone else. His examples are very ordinary. Paying someone too little without a thought for how they'll manage, not paying a worker on the day you owe them, never imagining the trouble that delay causes them.
And the one that gets me is the careless word. He says a thoughtless word can do as much harm as a deliberately cruel one, which is humbling, because the malicious wounding, again, most of us avoid. But the offhand remark that lands badly, the thing you said without thinking that someone carried home, that's daily.
And his fix for it is just attention again, the same thread that runs through the whole book. Think about the consequences of what you do before you do it. Most unintentional cruelty isn't a failure of the heart, it's a failure of attention.
And then the third sin, superstition. And this is the one where the book is most clearly speaking from 100 years ago and a particular place. So we should be honest about that and careful with it.
We should. By superstition, he means belief held blindly, without examination, of the kind we touched on back in the discrimination episodes. And his concern here is specifically how that kind of unexamined belief breeds cruelty. He gives examples that are very much of his world, the sacrifice of animals in religious ritual. And he takes a clear position that eating meat is itself one of these cruelties. What he calls the superstition that man needs flesh for food.
And on that one, I think we just present it as his view and let people sit with it for themselves. The book takes a firm vegetarian stance, rooted in this idea of doing no harm to living things. Some listeners will share that completely, others won't, and it's not really our place to settle it from here. But it's clearly a sincere position, not a casual one. It comes straight out of that first command, do no hurt to any living thing.
That's fair, and I'd leave it there too. It's a genuine and consistent position, whether or not a given listener lands in the same place. And then there's the most dated passage in the whole book, which we should name directly. He refers to the treatment of, in his words, the depressed classes in our beloved India.
And that language is obviously of its era. What he's pointing at is the caste system. and the cruelty done to people pushed to the very bottom of it. And the thing worth noticing, I think, is that for the time he was writing, he's firmly on the right side of it. He's calling that mistreatment a cruelty and a superstition. He's appalled by it.
That's the important thing to hold. The phrasing is a century old, but the heart of it is an early, clear protest against the way a whole group of people were being degraded. He even says this is how superstition breeds heartless cruelty, even among people who supposedly know the duty of brotherhood. He's naming the hypocrisy of it.
And his warning at the end of all three is to the reader, not to other people. He says, "Be very careful that no slightest trace of this remains in you," which is the move he keeps making. Turn it inward. Don't go hunting for cruelty and superstition out there. Find it in yourself first.
And having spent all that time on what not to do, the harm to avoid, he turns to the second half of love, which is the active part. And this is where it warms right up. He says it's not enough to just refrain from evil. You have to be actively doing good. He wants you, in his phrase, so filled with the desire to serve that you're always on the watch for the chance to do it.
And he widens the circle of who that service is for, in a way I found really moving. He says, not to people alone, but even to animals and to plants. Everything living falls inside the care. Nothing is outside it.
And there's a piece of practical wisdom tucked in here that I think is easy to miss. He says, do it in small things every single day so that the habit forms, so that when the rare big chance to help comes along, you don't miss it. You're already in the practice of looking.
Which is just lovely, because it takes the pressure off the grand gesture. You don't sit around waiting to save someone's life. You hold the door, you carry the bag, you send the kind message. Daily, until helping is just the shape your attention naturally takes. And then if the big moment ever comes, your hands already know what to do.
And then he tells you why all of this, the whole book really, finally points outward and not inward. He says, if you long to be one with God, it's not for your own sake. It's so that you can be a channel through which His love can flow out to reach other people.
A channel, not a destination. And that reframes the entire book, doesn't it? All four qualities, all that careful inner work, the seeing, the wanting less, the steadying yourself. None of it was ever meant to end with you. It was clearing you out so something could flow through.
And he reaches for two images at the very end that have stayed with me for years. He says the person on this path is like a pen in the hand of God, an instrument something writes through. And then, in almost the same breath, he says they're also a living plume of fire, raying out love onto the world.
I love that those two images sit right next to each other because they're so different. The pen is humble, passive almost. You're just the thing being written through. You don't even supply the words. And then the flame is the opposite, active, radiant, pouring out. And he says you are both at once.
Received and given at the same time. You take it in like a pen takes ink, and you give it off like a flame gives heat. And then he closes the teaching by gathering the whole thing into three words. He says will, wisdom, and love. The wisdom that lets you help, the will that directs the wisdom, and the love that inspires the will. And he says those three are aspects of one thing.
Three faces of a single reality. And it's a beautiful place for the book to land, because it means none of them works alone. Love without wisdom is just sentiment that might do harm. Wisdom without love is cold and clever and useless. Will without either is just force. You need all three turning together.
And that really is the end of the teaching itself, which feels like the right moment for us to step back from the page for a bit and try to take in the whole thing. Because we've been very close to it, line by line, for 6 episodes.
Let's do that. Because when you pull back, the 4 qualities turn out to have a shape, don't they? They're not just a random list. They're almost a sequence.
They really are. And it's worth saying out loud because it only becomes clear once you've walked all of it. Discrimination comes first because before anything else, you have to be able to see. You have to be able to tell what lasts from what passes, the real from the unreal, to clear your eyes.
Then desirelessness, which loosens the grip. Once you can see what actually matters, the frantic wanting of everything else starts to relax. You stop being yanked around by 100 little hungers. You lighten the grip.
Then, good conduct, which steadies you. You take that clearer, lighter self and you tune it, the inner weather and the outer behavior, so you're actually stable enough to be of use. You steady the instrument.
And then, and only then, love, which turns the whole thing outward. All of that, the clear sight, the light grip, the steadiness, it was never for you. It was getting you ready to pour out. Open the channel. See it. Want less of the wrong things. Steady yourself. And then, give yourself away.
And when you say it like that, the order feels almost inevitable. You couldn't really start with love. You just burn out, or do harm with the best intentions, like he warned. The first three are what make the fourth one possible, without it becoming a mess.
And there's a thread that ran through every single episode for me, which I keep coming back to. From the very first page, this book refused to let us just admire it. Remember that line, right at the start? It is no use looking at the food and calling it good while you starve. You have to actually eat.
That was the whole posture of it. Don't find this beautiful, test it. Live a little of it and see if it holds. And I'll be honest, that's the thing that's kept me coming back to these 30-odd pages for years. It doesn't want to be understood. It wants to be practiced.
And that's the perfect bridge to the one thing we've been saving for the very end. Because there's a strange and rather wonderful twist in the story of who wrote this.
There is, and we've held it back on purpose because we didn't want it hanging over the whole series, but it belongs here at the close. This book was written by a boy, Krishnamurti, when he was very young, and it's all about devotion to a master, a teacher, following the word of someone wiser than you.
And the boy who wrote that grew up to become one of the most famous teachers of the 20th century. But here's the twist. He spent the rest of his very long life telling people, as clearly as he could, not to follow any teacher at all, including him.
He famously dissolved the entire organization that had been built up around him and said that truth is a pathless land, that you cannot approach it by any path, any religion, any sect. He told enormous crowds, in effect, stop looking to me, be a light unto yourself.
Which on the surface sounds like a complete contradiction of this little book. The book says, sit at the feet of the master. The man says, there is no master, get up off the floor. And it'd be easy to read that as him disowning the whole thing.
It would, but the longer I sit with it, the less it feels like a contradiction, and the more it feels like a thread. Because what was the deepest instruction in this book, underneath all the devotion? Back in discrimination, what did he say? Think for yourself. Don't hold a belief just because 1,000 others hold it. Don't take a thing as true because it's old or in a sacred book.
That's true. The book is devotional on its surface, but its actual method, the thing it keeps asking you to do, is to examine everything yourself and not take anyone's word for it, including, you could argue, its own.
So the man who said, be a light unto yourself, might just be the boy from this book, grown all the way up. He didn't betray the teaching. He followed its deepest instructions so completely that he walked it right out the other side of its own scaffolding.
And that, honestly, might be the most hopeful note to end on, because it means this book was never asking for blind obedience, even when it used the language of it. The double lines were always meant to come off the page eventually. You learn to write straight with them, and then one day you write freely without them.
That's a really lovely way to bring it full circle, Lena. The whole book is a set of double lines. Helpful, maybe even necessary for a while. And the point was never to need them forever. The point was to learn to walk, and then walk on your own.
So if you've been with us across these 6 episodes, thank you. Truly. There's something quite intimate about reading one small book this slowly with other people, and we felt that the whole way through.
We really have. And our hope, more than anything, is the same one the book has for its reader. Not that you agree with all of it or with us. We've disagreed with bits of it ourselves out loud the whole way. But that something in here was worth testing against your own life.
So go back to it. It's only about 30 pages. Read it slowly, in your own time, and argue with it where you need to. Take what holds and leave what doesn't. That's exactly what its author would have wanted. probably more than anyone. And if this kind of thing speaks to you, our show is part of a growing family of shows over at Pillar 5 Media. Different hosts, different books, all of us trying to take something deep and make it feel a bit more like a conversation with a friend. You'll find them at pillar5media.com.
And that's pillar, then the number 5 as a numeral, media.com. So, the book itself ends on a short verse, and I'd like to read it just quietly to close, because after all these weeks, it feels like the right way to set the book back down. It goes, waiting the word of the master, watching the hidden light, listening to catch his orders in the very midst of the fight, seeing his slightest signal across the head of the throng, hearing his faintest whisper above earth's loudest song.
That is just beautiful. And whatever you take the master to mean, your conscience, the good, the deepest thing in you, that image of staying tuned to the quiet signal in the middle of all the noise, that's a good thing to carry out of all of this.
It really is. Thank you for walking the whole path with us.
Take care of yourselves. Go gently.